Hello, welcome to the first edition of my park podcast. I'm just going to spend some time this evening. The sun is setting, so we may be limited by how much light I get. But I'm going to spend some time talking about some ideas that I've been meaning to explore and write about and see how this medium feels in comparison to writing, and also to give you guys a little bit stronger of a sense of who I am and what the 3D version of me is, because you often see me in text transmitting my thoughts with words, which I love to do. But I also have a voice and a face, so let's explore. I do apologize if there's any background noise or if this somehow is not yet perfect technically. I will definitely work on figuring things out as I go, but for now, we're piloting this, so bear with me. Okay, I have some ideas that I've written down that I want to touch on, and I'm just going to kind of riff stream of consciousness style on whatever's feeling alive, guided by this outline, and that's all. I suppose this is a good time to say that if you do have anything that you want me to explore in this kind of medium or in my writing or anywhere else, you're welcome to reply, comment, whatever medium you find this on, whatever way you choose to reach me. If you have a theme you want me to dive into, I'd love to have a list, a backlog, where I don't need to only resource upon my own imagination. With that being said, one thing that I've been wanting to talk about is entropy and order, and how to control the amount of entropy that you allow to exist in your life. So one kind of minor example that was occurring to me as I was making this list was something that I've been trying to do less of lately is kind of half doing a chore or half doing something that's like a little bit frictional. Let's say there's like 3 dishes left in the sink and I've already made dinner and I'm cleaning up, and for some reason I have a particular aversion to this particular dish or whatever the analog is that most suits you. And so I'm like, okay, I'll just leave that and I'll do that in 20 minutes, or I'll do that in the morning, or I'll do that after dinner, or whatever it might be. Or I'm taking off my jewelry, and instead of like putting my necklace away properly and closing it and hanging it on my necklace holder, I'm like just taking it off and lying it down at the bottom of the necklace holder and not putting it all the way back. Or I'm taking out the garbage and not the recycling. Some version of like a half done chore. Insert your own Mad Libs blank. I've just noticed that when I'm living in a way that allows me to be doing half chores or incomplete tasks, there's kind of like this loose, like there's this leakage, this energy leakage and entropy that begins to build up. And I can kind of like feel in my awareness these like half completed things occupying me and preoccupying me. And it never seems like they're going to. When I take my necklace off and put it at the bottom of my necklace holder instead of on my necklace holder, it doesn't seem in any way consequential. But it all adds up and it all builds up. And I've noticed that when I am finishing something, like I'm pushing past that final 20% of friction or whatever it might be, I just feel so much more in control of my life. And it's almost comical how small these things actually end up being that give me this felt sense of agency and stewardship and sovereignty over how things are unfolding. But it really is like these minute, there's no clutter anywhere, there's no chore left unfinished when I leave the house, there's no email that I'm putting off until tomorrow. There's just a kind of seamless, effortless flow of action and life force towards the things that I've deemed are important. And I'm just sitting with this observation and this noticing of when I reach for the more avoidant tendencies, or I guess more accurately, when I don't reach for the more sovereign tendencies, and what is in my life or what is happening in my life that is creating this kind of just very, very low grade overwhelm or sense of chaos that is causing me to like leave that extra 2 dishes in the sink, or leave my necklace at the bottom of the holder, or leave the recycling and not the garbage, or whatever it might be. And by extension of this, I think an easy way to kind of make it feel like my life is in order is to just complete tasks and do chores and finish things that I start. And it's so cliche in a way to just say, like, finish things that you start and you're going to feel better, because I'm sure we've all heard a version of that in many different contexts. But I really do think this is a big key, and this is a big unlock to having an in control, sovereign, and enjoyable life. So that's something I'm paying attention to. Noticing when I'm not completing tasks and then asking questions about what's going on in my life such that I don't feel like I can finish this minor chore that would almost go under my nose unnoticed, and doing it. And when I am getting things done and I am completing things that I start and I am doing the small frictional things that it requires just like a little bit of expensive dopamine to do, what has allowed me to be in that state where I feel a little bit more in control and sovereign? Next point, karma and closing loops. I've already made like 2 videos and probably far too many tweets about this concept, so I'll keep this one short. But I've been thinking a lot about karma. What drives karma? Is karma real? Is karma a really good and helpful and catchy concept for a different phenomenon that's kind of, or the same phenomenon that's kind of just rationally explained from observing why we do things and why things happen to us? And to make a lot of reflecting concise in my conclusion, where I'm at with karma is the reason things happen to you that you do to other people is because you have some degree of an unconscious and not fully lucid pattern that is unfolding in your behavior and that is expressing itself through you. And you have the capacity to be on either side of that pattern. So you could be perpetuating the pattern, or you could have the pattern perpetuated onto you. But until you recognize whatever that behavior is and you declare that it is no longer acceptable in your world, or it is something that you're going to heal or close the loop of, it can just continue finding you on repeat until you no longer accept it or allow it, or you decline it as it's entering your world instead of afterwards. An example I gave about this in a video was, let's say you did something like got with one of your really close friends' ex-girlfriends pretty shortly after they broke up. And you kind of knew it was a disloyal thing that you didn't really feel proud of doing, but you were really into her and she was good with it, and one thing led to another, etc. That relationship doesn't work out. Many years later, something similar happens to you in the inverse, where you are with a girl and then either you break up, or maybe during a relationship or something like that happens where she gets with one of your really close friends. And it feels like this kind of bitter, unpleasant, karmic, cosmic joke, but I think there's something real happening there, which is you are attracted to a kind of girl who embodies this sort of aura that pulls in people close to the person that she's with, and perhaps like entertains and engages those connections in a way that you wish you wouldn't, but you were kind of seduced by initially. And only in fully owning that you are being drawn to this archetype of person who has a way of sort of weaving these patterns and being a part of them can you escape the loop of perpetuating that pattern again on either side of it. And that's just one example, but you know, the same example could be applied to, let's say you find yourself in a kind of toxic workplace where you're being overworked and no one is listening to you and there's no respect for your boundaries, although, you know, boundaries are something I have many feelings about that we'll get into later. But yeah, you just find yourself in this kind of repeated cycle of loop where everyone's traversing your boundaries and nobody has respect for you, and you're being worked way too hard and there's far too many demands on you. And yet you leave that job and move to the next one and the same pattern repeats. And at a certain point, there does need to be a sort of recognition around your role in the pattern, and agency and victimhood and consciousness and unconscious patterns is something I'm going to probably talk a lot about throughout all of these topics. But if it is hard for you to hear that you might be responsible for the patterns you continue to find yourself in, you might not like the rest of this episode or much of my content, because I really do believe in kind of a radical degree of personal responsibility, which I think is an absolute privilege to be able to take, because if you are able to take a radical level of personal responsibility, then you can create the life that you want. You can remove things from your life that no longer belong there. You can put things into your life that you wish did belong there. And the trade-off of that is recognizing all the ways that you are either consciously or unconsciously contributing to patterns that you are not proud of and patterns that you do not want to be in or continue to be in. So allow this to be a gentle nudge or sense of encouragement or reminder to just kind of take stock of the patterns that you keep finding yourself in, and the situations that you might feel like are just happening to you or you claim are not things that you would consciously opt into. This is kind of like an existential kink idea too. For those who don't know, existential kink is a book. I wish I remembered the author's name right now, but I don't. And the concept is whatever like negative, what you would describe as negative circumstance that you find yourself in your life, there is some part of you that's kind of existentially getting off to that. So let's say you find yourself continuously running out of money or low on money or impulsively spending money, and you say that this is something you want to change and this is a pattern that you want to break or something that just keeps happening to you and you don't know why. The book kind of encourages you to think about the sort of shadowy pleasure you get from whatever pattern you might be in. And, maybe there's like an erotic, like arousing part of this last minute hustle when you're running out of money and you need to like generate money from somewhere, or when you like feel this rush because you need to pay your credit card bill, or in the case of the toxic workplace, like maybe a part of you kind of likes being told what to do with such like authority, and there's a part of you that kind of like enjoys being subservient to an organization or a person or some sort of leadership in that way. Or maybe there's a part of you that really enjoys like having people see you as a victim of this crazy toxic work environment and ask you all these questions and want to take care of you and want to listen to you and rescue you from that situation that you're finding yourself in. And this is kind of just to thematically reveal to you how you would apply this insight. It doesn't need to be such that like any one of those specific examples resonates, but if you find yourself in a repeating pattern that you describe as negative, that you don't necessarily want to be in, but you are in it repeatedly, then investigate what part of you might be enjoying a piece of it. And if that comes up dry, then I would investigate like what are the conditions and the circumstances that leave you continuously being in these same patterns, and how can you take responsibility for your role in them and recognize when your role in them is ignited so that you can withdraw or avoid or opt out the next time that pattern presents itself and threatens to repeat itself in your life. This is one I'm still working out, and I'm curious other people's thoughts and experiences with. I've labeled this topic being honest with friends while still being a safe space. I have a bit of a reputation, which if you consume any of my content, you can probably understand why, of being really honest with people. And honestly, my experience of it is that I just see people so clearly, and I see what's happening in their life so clearly, that it's almost not available to me to dishonestly affirm a behavior or a story that I don't see as true in someone's life. Sometimes I'll just abstain and not say anything, or kind of just allow someone to, speak and vent, of course. But when someone asks for my thoughts or my advice, like I have a lot of trouble not telling them the truth, like the truth of what I think, which obviously selects for friends who can handle that and value that, which I do think is, a very valuable thing. I try my best to surround myself with people who tell me the truth and who are willing to make me uncomfortable by telling me the truth. And I really, really value that, and I'm so grateful when someone does it for me. But another part of my nature is to be like a very spacious container for people and to just listen to and love people kind of regardless of what they're saying and what they're feeling. And I think I have noticed recently that like sometimes those two poles of my nature can collide or sort of begin to like tear from each other. It almost feels like each pole is pulling me in a different direction. Like if a friend comes to me and they've recently made a series of bad decisions and are now feeling, really down about it, but also kind of a bit in their victimhood about it, like this challenging set of things has happened to me. Of course, there's like a period of grief and a period of sadness that comes with any like sad ending to something or uncomfortable situation that someone might be in. But I do think the path out of those feelings is to recognize whatever it is that you can either do to change the situation to make yourself feel better, or to maybe apologize, or to heal anyone that you might have harmed in a series of not ideal decisions made. And I think the answer to this is just discernment. Like when someone is down bad and is not feeling like very, like really honestly strong and receptive enough to hear the truth, I think that one's responsibility as a friend is to really just affirm to that person that it's going to be okay. Like they are going to feel good again. And for now, all they need to do is just kind of like work on doing the things that will make them feel better and make them feel strong and have will and agency in their life, and to not just kind of like spiral down to a really negative place. But then once that person kind of rises, hopefully, from the ashes of whatever situation they're in, I do think there's a place for loving honesty as a friend. And I really wish this was something that was more common, especially in adult friendships. It's interesting because I used to do competitive gymnastics, and I'm still quite close with my close group of friends from gymnastics, and we grew up doing it together. And we were kind of exposed to a form of intensity and radical honesty from adults around us at a young age, just by nature of the sport and what it required of us and of the adults who were coaching us. That kind of gave us all like a much stronger, thicker skin than I think most people just get through like a run-of-the-mill childhood or like even childhood sport. And so it's kind of interesting for me to watch how I can like play with my lever of honesty when it comes to like different people that I've met in different phases of my life. And with my friends from gymnastics, I find that I can trust the strength of their ego to accept challenging reflections and feedback. And it strikes me that that's the case because we were trained to literally be able to take feedback, like to take corrections, to take, that's what they were called in gymnastics. It would be like corrections, like point your toes, straighten your knees, you know, jump higher, push away from the bar in this way. And we would get praised for fixing our corrections, like for integrating our corrections and listening to them. And so it just makes me think about like the different ways that we are conditioned to receive or reject feedback from people in our lives and from different sources and from ourselves. I also think like the flip side of that quality that I just described is that we're all quite hard on ourselves and could be overcritical of ourselves at times and are always demanding more from ourselves because of this conditioning we had of like literally trying to pursue the highest degree of what we were capable of, which I think is overall in the net a good thing, but it does lead to sometimes not even noticing when you're doing something well, not even noticing when you've achieved something that you are striving for, and then feeling like you're behind on the next thing. It can lead to, just like a sort of endless dissatisfaction of whatever the product is of your work and your effort and your attention and your time and your love, because you can kind of see ways that it can be improved upon. And I think these are all things that we have the power to become conscious of and soften in adulthood. And some people might have the opposite task. If my gymnastics friends have to be a little softer on themselves, there's a lot of people who didn't get that treatment from an external source that toughened them up, and they might need to strengthen their egos and strengthen their inner mental toughness to be able to handle what the world is going to give them. Which brings me to another thing that I want to talk about, which is boundaries. Boundaries is such a charged word now. Like, I'm just wondering even what you're thinking as I say boundaries. If I was you and I had heard someone say boundaries in a sort of stream of consciousness reflection podcast like this, I would think, oh, this person's about to tell me that I need to set boundaries in my life and protect myself from people who are invading my energy and space. And my problem is that I don't have strong enough boundaries, and I need to tell more people about my boundaries. And I would kind of do that in that voice I just did, like sort of this like mocking, sassy, almost like dismissiveness around boundaries. I feel like the word has been diluted and the value of it has been diluted as a result. And that's unfortunate because boundaries are an incredibly powerful tool and something that I think can be heroic in helping us prune our lives of things that don't belong there, and people and work and anything else that doesn't belong there. But I do strongly believe that boundaries are something that is ultimately meant only for you to really know about and to implement in your life. I don't think, with obvious exceptions, like obviously people should respect your space and your reasonable boundaries aside, I think that the idea of boundaries has been taken too far in its tendency to now be wielded as a weapon against people for the ways that they are traversing what you have decided is an appropriate set of psychic needs that might impose upon other people's theoretical boundaries and inflict unnecessary harm or suffering or effort or work or whatever it might be on someone else. My observation of the most useful application for boundaries is to notice in yourself where you are placing time, energy, and attention and love that is not feeling good anymore, that is not rewarding you, that is not producing the fruits that you want it to produce, that is taking you away from yourself, that is taking you away from your center. And to have boundaries with yourself about the way that you approach the sinks of energy that put you in that position, but to not necessarily tell the sinks of energy, like, don't come near me. Obviously, there's exceptions to this, but you can just choose to abstain from the patterns and the causes of your distress. And again, there are cases where you need to explicitly communicate and enforce a boundary with someone else. But I think in the vast majority of cases, if you just have a really deep and intentional conversation with yourself, you will recognize the boundaries that you yourself are not respecting in your own inner world and the way that you could be relating differently to those. And I say this not because I'm trying to not have compassion or empathy for someone that feels that they need to communicate boundaries to someone, but I just want you to feel as sovereign and in control and agentic towards your life as you possibly can. And I find that waiting for someone else or hoping that someone else is going to respect some boundary that you have ultimately arbitrarily deduced and decided upon is a way to like sort of take your inner power and extract it and place it in the hands of someone outside of yourself that you have no actual control over their behavior and just hope they do the thing that you want. Whereas you could equally just take the power, keep it in yourself, decide what it is that you want from yourself, and then you have a very clear picture of whether you are or are not doing the things that you want and that you said you would do. And if you aren't doing those things, then you get to reflect on why, and you get to see, and you get to tweak, and you get to just improve your life agentically and independently. And you don't need to wait for anyone else to rescue you or save you or honor your boundaries so that you can be okay. I guess I've been talking mostly about this so far in all my different answers, but the next topic I had written down was victimhood and agency and repelling ideas that convince you your position is fixed or will get worse. I like that. I like what I wrote there. Repelling ideas that convince you your position is fixed or will get worse. I think that's a good summary of how I try to conduct my life. I repel ideas that convince me that my position is fixed or will get worse. I literally do not accept ideas like that. And some might call that delusional, but it's worked for me. I mean, a poignant example is when I was 14, I fell off the balance beam at a competition, gymnastics competition, and broke my ankle really badly in 3 places. I sort of dislocated it. It was rather messy, and I got surgery on it and got 2 screws and a rod in there. The rod's out now, the screws are still in there. And it was like, when I reflect back on that time, it's almost like I didn't accept that this incident was going to change my reality. I accepted that it happened. Obviously, I was now in a wheelchair for a little bit and then crutches and couldn't walk, but I was so unwilling to identify with this injury. And the reason I was unwilling to identify with this injury was because I now was separated from my desired reality of being fully mobile and able to walk and move and do gymnastics and do all the things that I took for, granted to an extent the day before that this happened. I was separated from the reality where all of that was true. And I was now put in a reality where I couldn't walk and couldn't do most things. And I kind of understood, I think, intuitively then even, that if I were to identify with this reality of being injured and being immobile and being limited, then all that would do was make my situation that I was objectively in reality worse. Because I was not going to be able to walk. But if I sort of like energetically and psychologically kept myself as close to the reality I had just departed from, where I was fully mobile and strong and my ankle was fine, as possible through literally mental discipline and brain rewiring, I was just convinced that I would get back to that faster and that I would not draw out my recovery any longer than it needed to be, that I would take my recovery very seriously because it was all tracking to that, back to that reality, or to a new reality, I guess, of, mobility and freedom with this injury. And my parents kind of joke about how I treated like that injury. It was like I literally didn't allow myself to be affected. Like, I was trying to go back to school within a day or 2 days of getting home from the hospital, which was crazy because I was just been operated on and I was in a wheelchair and I was like kind of like on probably crazy pain meds, and I tried to go to school and I like fell over like in my house. I was trying to get up, my parents didn't let me go. But as soon as I could go back, I was back at school and I was back in gymnastics. Like, I was going to my 4 to 5 hour training sessions, and I was just doing what we called conditioning, which was sort of just strengthening exercises. I would do like isometrics with my leg, where you just like sort of lift your leg up and down, use like body weight on the floor, and I would do upper body. My dad says that he remembers me saying like, "I'm just gonna strengthen my upper body, Dad." And I sort of say all of this to say, like, I just really don't ever remember feeling sorry for myself when this happened. And I remember being very aware of how delicate my psyche was at this point, that like if I was to let myself feel sorry for myself and sort of let myself be really affected by and disheartened by what had happened, it was going to be such a harder rut to get out of in every way, physically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. And so I just kind of was relentless in trying to keep my reality as close to how I would be if I wasn't injured. Like, that was how I exhibited my agency. I was just really willing to do whatever it took to make myself feel normal and feel like to literally manifest this recovery that I was on now. And it worked, I guess. Like, I recovered fully reasonably quickly, all things considered. I did gymnastics again. Like, I was able to use my ankle fully again. What's less interesting to me is about the whole event is not that I recovered fully physically, but that I don't have like many memories of being very sad from that time. Like, I don't have very many memories of being very distraught over my situation. I do have like a memory or two of being like really upset, going to bed and just like being like, wow, this is my reality, and like, fuck, this is kind of brutal. But I think I only let myself do that like once, like going to bed once. And then I was like, this made me feel so much worse. Like, I'm just not going down this mental pathway anymore. Obviously, this is an extreme case, but I do think like this is a kind of incident that can easily turn into like a very traumatic event and can create this like traumatic relationship to what had happened and to the way that it happened, and to create all this fear and resistance and distress around it happening again in that same way. And I think there is an opportunity whenever you're presented with like an unfortunate hand dealt to you to just like honestly body that, like just to say like, okay, like that's what was given to me. Like, I'm gonna just apply myself to like make this as good as it can possibly be. I'm gonna keep going to gymnastics every other day. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to like do the things and attend the things that I was gonna go to anyway. And I don't want to frame this in a way where it sounds like you're bypassing, you know, real life events that happened. And obviously I wasn't trying to like walk on my foot the next day, but I do think that there's another component of healing, and that's just your mental, honestly, like your psyche and the way that you position yourself to receive and embody information about your situation. And the reason I say in this title, like repelling ideas that convince you that your position is fixed or will get worse, is because stories are a substance. Narrative is a substance. Placebo works because narrative is a substance. When I say placebo works because narrative is a substance, like you take a sugar pill and you're told it's going to make you feel whatever, better from your tummy ache or whatever the experiment is. Half the people, or like whatever the stats are about placebo, a significant amount, I think the majority, depending on obviously the experiment, will experience like the legitimate relief from whatever effects the placebo is hypothetically supposed to not affect at all by believing that they were taking something healing. And similarly, I think I was reading this book about winter this season, which I honestly loved. It was called How to Winter. It was basically all about how to, this is so relevant actually. It was all about how to enjoy winter and how to sort of not allow winter to get you down, because I really have this thesis that like we're sleeping on winter out here in the West, in sort of like modern cities in North America and wherever else, you know, people bemoan winter. Like, I kind of like winter. There's a lot of things that I like about winter. Obviously, I'm in a park and it's so green and it's so beautiful, and summer is amazing and I love summer, but I also love winter, and I like the like kind of hermit nature of it and how like cozy and sweet and alone you can be, and there's just a lot of parts of it that I savor. And this book basically talks about this concept of nocebo, which is like making something worse by thinking it's going to be bad. And this is what we all do with winter around these parts where it gets cold and dark and gray, and the setting behind me would be barren and cold and it would look dead. And there is just obviously like the truth of winter, like it doesn't look like this in winter, but I went on this one walk in winter where I was just like, the trees were just so bare and it was so cold and everything was just like gray, and I kind of was just like tuning into how epic it is that nature does this. Like, nature sheds every year and dies and gets resurrected and is alive through these brutal winters, these brutal colds. It's like, it doesn't look like much is going on in these, you know, these guys, but they're holding it down and they're ready to blossom again in the summer. And I was just noticing like how much more awe and reverence it gave me for the environment I was in, to just have that simple mindset shift. And I think this applies to everything, right? Like, two people will live in the same city and have the same day and have the same life and feel completely different about it. And I honestly have a very sensitive radar for people with very like victimhood mindsets and ways of going about the world, because they are always like complaining about the things that are happening to them, even when those things aren't objectively bad. Like, sometimes an easy tell is just if someone's complaining about something that I would be like excited about. And again, this isn't about bypassing negative emotion, but it's about telling better stories about the things that are happening to you and what they're leading to. For example, the story that, or the phrase that everything happens for a reason. People love to rip into this phrase and be like, no, everything does not happen for a reason, and this is like delusional, and this is woo, and this is whatever. Who cares? Like, who cares if that's true or not? If everything happens for a reason gives you a sense of hope and groundedness and optimism and trust and faith that things are headed in the right direction, that's an incredible belief to hold. That's an incredible idea to hold. And obviously there are damaging ideas that are like overly optimistic and delusional, and that can harm you, but I think, again, use your discernment. Like, I put trust in the individual on these things, but be very sensitive to ideas that you're holding that convince you that you're in a stuck, fixed position that you can't get out of, that other people have put you in, that you couldn't possibly shift, that is only going to get worse. Any kind of belief that you hold like that and that you are expanding energy into is causing you harm, invisible harm. And I think just being very, very rigorous with what you hold in your psyche and what you allow yourself to think is just a very important thing, especially in the modern age where our minds are constantly under attack from different narratives that are trying to tell us what to think and what not to think, and who to believe and who not to believe, and who we should hate and who we should love and who we should feel sorry for and who we shouldn't. You need to use a lot of discernment. You need to use a lot of discernment to be filtering ideas that only make sense into your mind and that you like how they make you feel, that you like the energy that they fill you with. You don't have any obligation to hold on to ideas that make you feel worse and that make you resent your life. I free you from that right now if you're doing it. Like, you really don't need to do that. I just feel really strongly about this. And this is what all my work is about. I just had a tweet that I kind of wrote in a sleepless, enthusiastic state where I was just kind of thinking about what I'm doing and like why I think it's so important. And like, what I'm doing is helping people disentangle themselves from narratives that have kept them blocked and unfree and angry and sad and drained and sick and resentful and limited and frustrated. I help people see their own minds and their own inner worlds more clearly so that they can separate the narratives that are not serving them and the beliefs that are not serving them about themselves from the truth and from what is within their control and from what they have the capacity to shift. And I help them do those things. I use people's inner wisdom to help them heal. And I just feel very strongly like that should be the first line of attempted healing whenever anyone has an ailment of, reasonable, not so severe that obviously they need like extreme and rapid intervention. But like, so many of my clients, for example, have identified as having chronic fatigue or long COVID or feeling like they don't have access to their life force, feeling like they are drained all the time, that they're tired so easily, that they're always fatigued. And we reversed those effects with helping them listen to and recognize their own intuition and their own inner wisdom and put it into action so that they could listen to the signal that was making them feel bad so that they can feel better. Like, literally this practice of like, see what you're feeling, understand it for its truth and for its transmission and its signal that it's trying to give you. Use your agency to enact that insight. Feel more free, like feel freed from this negative feeling. And I just feel so strongly that so many feelings and ailments and forms of suffering that we experience are from like an inner dissatisfaction and unconscious signal that we haven't looked at and that we need to look at to heal. Like, you can numb that, you can use whatever substance or whatever behavior to numb those feelings, but that doesn't solve what you're feeling, and that doesn't heal whatever is like out of order in your inner space. And Also, of course, if you choose to do that, then like you're numbing so much other stuff. You're numbing the joys and the ecstasy and the euphoria of life, as well as like the pain and the devastation and the grief. And there's really no judgment or charge for anyone's individual choices and the ways that we respond to really hard things, which can be intolerable in some cases. But if you feel like you do just have kind of some vague, unclear, undiscerning levels of dissatisfaction and like malaise in yourself and in your life, and you have a sense that there's maybe just like something that's trying to speak to you from your inner world that you can listen to and enact to free yourself from those feelings, I just feel really strongly about going there first and starting there. I hope that's also what my writing transmits. Of course, like that is the work I do in my one-on-one coaching with people, is I help people like really tease out what is going on in their inner world. We look at it together, we can understand the narratives that are not serving and, repollinate them with helpful agency-oriented narratives. But also in my writing, like that's what I'm doing for myself. I'm always like, what is this negative feeling that I'm having? Or why do I feel disempowered? Or why do I feel confused? Or why do I feel envious? Or why do I feel disoriented in my life? And my writing is an effort to clarify that in myself so that I can just say, oh, there it is. Like that's the insight that was making me feel sad or anxious or avoidant or tired or resentful or whatever it might be. And now I can just apply that and move forward. And I just find this to be such a magical and healing and liberating way of relating to the things that you feel, that it saddens me that we have subjected an entire generation to their first line of defense essentially being victimhood, like essentially being, oh, you feel this way, this is how you feel now, like you're gonna have to take this substance or prescription for the rest of your life and not feel these feelings that are fixed for you, when in reality I just think so many feelings are meant to be listened to and meant to reorient us and meant to nudge us towards where we are really supposed to be and what we are really supposed to be doing, and away from what we aren't supposed to be doing. And I feel really strongly about this. I think it's a tragedy that we are not approaching so many of these cases and these situations where people have been trapped and feel trapped in these negative feelings with just really straightforward inner work and deeper awareness and confrontation of what they might not be looking at and what needs to be seen and approached and enacted. But that's the work I'm trying to do, and I feel really good about the results that I create with people. I just wish it was even more common and even more widely available, and that people realize that their minds are the most powerful substance that they have access to in any given moment, within reason, that exists inside them, and that learning how to discipline your mind and learning how to rewrite the narratives in your mind is like one of the most powerful and transferable and lasting and healing tools that you can acquire and possess. It's getting a little dark and the camera is getting a little fuzzy, so I'm thinking that maybe I should pause here and just let this be part one. I have a bunch more things written down, but I don't want you to be looking at like a 3-pixel version of me as I say them. So let's run it back. I'm just going to put this together, see how it goes. If you guys like it, I'll do more. If there are other topics you want me to cover, let me know. I'm really grateful for your attention, and I hope this was fun to listen to, and I enjoyed making it. I love sitting under a tree and speaking my thoughts out loud, so it was a pretty good activity. Thank you. See you soon.